to the World Sustainable Procurement Day 2024 special session. And I say this is a special session because it's for the first time ever that we have a session of the 24-hour virtual World Sustainable Procurement Day by the Sustainable Procurement Pledge, hosted as well in a physical location, in a physical hub in the world. So this is quite unique. We have an audience here in person. We have 2 audiences online on AirMeet, the platform of the Sustainable Procurement Pledge, and as well on Zoom for the Euclid Network Impact Summit, a European Social Enterprise Network organization. So it's fantastic to have all these audiences. It's quite a unique kind of TV-like production show that we have. So I can wave at you. I hope everyone sees me. And Guy, I think, yes, waving back. Hello, everyone. Well, we have fantastic speakers here and a fantastic moderator. We also have a speaker here on the stage in the room. So this is really something. We have 3 sessions here taking place physically on this location, while all the other sessions as well are also streamed. We have a boardroom lounge here in person. And of course, everyone for the Sustainable Procurement Pledge and AirMeet is watching this online. So welcome, over 4,000 people registered for the World Sustainable Procurement Day online, and as well here, 200 people registered physically in The Hague, in Titanium Impact City, The Hague, the municipality, where we had the deputy mayor open yesterday this summit. Welcome, and then I give the word to Guy Badel from Social Value Portal, the CEO, one of the amazing co-chairs of the public sector chapter of the Sustainable Procurement Pledge. And Guy, I'm very, very pleased that you can open this session, and you have brought some fantastic speakers. Good luck.
Brilliant. Good morning, everybody, and good afternoon or evening if you're calling in from another part of the world, and welcome to The Hague, and it's great to be here. My name's Guy Battle. I'm the co-chair of the public sector chapter of the Sustainable Procurement Pledge. Just before we get going, just please, we are really building a movement here of sustainable public procurement and also procurement professionals, both public and private sector, voluntary sector as well. Please get involved, make your pledge by getting involved to embed sustainability into your procurement. So our title today is Using Public Sector Spend to Drive Sustainable Procurement, subtext, and create a better world. And that's important. I think our view, my view certainly is that the public sector spends many trillions of pounds, dollars, euros across the world. It supports our communities in delivering some fantastic services. I guess the question that I have and that we're beginning to answer here and explore is, should public sector money come with strings? What opportunity do we have as public sector buyers to influence the private sector to ensure that we have sustainability delivering, coursing through all parts of our communities, with the ultimate aim of creating a better society? As a public sector chapter, we've been going now a couple of years, and I thought it was just worthwhile just bring out a couple of things that we've found sort of as we've done our discovery of public sector procurement. And I'm going to start off just talking about definitions very quickly. And we found that there's 2 bits to the conversation. One is the core contract that you might be procuring, which needs to be energy efficient. You need to think about your supply chain compliance, due diligence, all these sorts of things. And the other sort of emerging element of this that we see in places like Canada and the UK and various others is this added value. These are the strings, if you like. This is what comes, an expectation that comes with sustainable money, with public money. And so it's that added sustainable value that comes as a result of winning that contract. And so we're finding that countries around the world are beginning to explore this, but they are struggling with definitions. In Canada and UK, we have something called social value and social procurement that's being delivered. But I think the other thing that's everyone's sort of struggling with is measuring and monitoring and proving the outcomes are being delivered. So we're going to explore some of these ideas today. I've got five fantastic speakers that I'll introduce just in a moment. We've got Julia and Julia who are going to talk about the workforce and human rights. We've got Gareth from the British government who's going to talk about what the British government's doing. And then we've got Darren from local government. And then finally, we've got Alexandria. And I've kind of designed the session so we kind of go from high level, not conceptual, but global issues. And so we've got Julia and Julia, the two Julias, talking about those global issues, which are the big challenges. And then we've got, down to policy making. We've got Gareth talking about policy making. And then we've got Darren, who's going to talk about how is this being delivered to real people in real communities. Darren has a background of local government. And then finally, we're going to expand back out again with Alexandra, talk about some EU-wide initiatives. Everyone's going to talk for about 7 to 5 minutes. And then we're going to dive into questions and hopefully we'll have enough time for 10 or 15 minutes questions. So look, I'm going to stop talking there and pass on to Julia and Julia. And Julia and Julia, if you just say next slide, I will be the person managing the slides for you. Over to you.
Thank you, Guy, for the introduction and welcome everybody to this very important and timely session, and happy World Sustainable Procurement Day to everybody. We will talk about the social procurement on the multilateral stage and what role international organizations can play to advance human rights in supply chains. I'm the first Julia. I'm from the OSCE's anti-trafficking office in Vienna. I'm leading a project on sustainable supply chains here in Vienna, and we look at responsible procurement from the angle of combating human trafficking and labor exploitation. Next slide, please. And next. Yeah, just to give you a very brief overview, our actions and policies at the OSCE are guided by, of course, also key international standards, such as the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, the OECD Guidelines for Multinational Enterprises, and the Sustainable Development Goals. But we also do have specific internal frameworks at the OSCE, which are binding for us and which guide our actions and policies. Our frameworks advocate for collaborative business practices, human rights due diligence, and transparency in supply chains, and they also explicitly commit us to ensuring that our procurement operations do not contribute to any form of human trafficking. Next slide, please. How does that look like in practice? How does our responsible procurement look like? So we do focus on a couple of approaches, let's say. We have a risk-based approach, which you can see on the right side of the slide. We were focusing on social sustainability, but particularly, as I mentioned, on the angle of human trafficking and labor exploitation risks. So we have narrowed that already down a bit. We prioritize high-risk goods and services for efficient risk mitigations. So we are looking at the right end of the risk that is mostly, in our case, service and hospitality agreements. We do assess those risks across our entire procurement process, from planning to contracting, and also in all our executive structures, all our duty stations that we have across the OSCE region, which spans 57 countries. And we also evaluate the feasibility of supplier engagement or influence that we can actually have on those suppliers in the respective markets we operate in. Secondly, more looking at the left column, we are also following a collaborative approach, which is very important to actually get stuff done and to implement social procurement, because we believe that successful implementation is only possible if the whole organization is on board. So we believe in integrating all levels, from the top leadership to the operational teams on the ground doing the work, with the ultimate goal to create a unified, sustainable procurement strategy across our organization. So close cooperation is really key to that work, not only OSCE internal, but also external. We are also collaborating with a variety of other international organizations and civil society organizations. We want to align our standards and policies with them. We want to learn from each other, share best practices, and ultimately use that leverage that we can have together on the spend that we have combined. And we are learning more about that from Julia Jin in a few minutes, because we also are a founding member and secretariat to a specific task force, which comprises several UN agencies to also combat human trafficking, forced labor in supply chains. But we will hear about that in a few minutes. Next slide, please. To wrap this up, I just want to introduce a bit more what we do at the OSCE specifically. Like, this is our roadmap. And we have, well, that is our basically guiding roadmap. And we also have several tools that we have developed in the course of the last 3-4 years. Our initial steps were quite simple as well. We began by revising our internal and external policies, such as the supplier code of conduct and the general conditions of contract. And we also developed a comprehensive procurement guidance document, which is that purple picture on the right side, which is also available online, to guide our procurement staff in their day-to-day operations. On capacity building, we conducted a variety of workshops in all OSCE locations to enhance the capacity of our practitioners based on those tools that we have. And we also implemented a mandatory e-learning program for all procurement staff covering essential topics in this work, such as understanding human trafficking and forced labor in general, identifying the risks related in supply chains, and integrating anti-trafficking requirements into the day-to-day procurement processes. So that is mandatory for everybody that joins the OSCE, and also has been rolled out to other staff members, including finance, administration, legal, and of course, human rights related. We have specific action plans in place where we put the actions in writing, what needs to be done in the respective OSCE location. So we have that in every duty station that we have, leveraging our tools and resources there, and also giving ownership to the respective colleagues on the ground. We have a library of resources, which includes evaluation criteria and lessons learned from those action plans and the cases that we come across, and that supports the effective implementation of the action plans all across the OSCE. We also made anti-trafficking criteria mandatory in most of our tenders. So we have social sustainability really embedded in our tender documents to ensure also the seriousness among the suppliers. And we are attracting ultimately suppliers that are aligned with the OSCE values on combating trafficking and human rights protection. So it's really quality over quantity, which is great. I also want to emphasize that we do not end without bidders. Like, we do get bidders, and even bidders that initially have fallen short of the standards that we would like to see have expressed a willingness to adjust for future bidding opportunities. So it's really also an opportunity to educate the market and to learn and to sort of grow together and influence in a positive way. And that brings me to supplier engagement as the last thing to maybe highlight for now. We have several briefings that we do with suppliers. We offer business roundtables where we really try to hear the challenges that businesses face, and then again, educate why the OSCE is doing what we are doing, and how they could sort of adjust and align the standards. And this is always, of course, tailored to the respective market, excuse me. We also use adjustable surveys, which are again tailored to the respective markets and also the value of the contract. And there we ask specific questions that like suppliers have to provide answers to, or documents they have to provide when they want to bid for a specific tender that we issue. And then for the future, we have the priority to really focus more on the monitoring and access to remedy, which is also a big challenge. And we also do acknowledge that we do not have the resources to do that alone. So we do have several partners on the ground, NGOs, civil society, our missions that do support that work, because ultimately this is a joint effort. And it's also good to acknowledge that. And it's good to have platforms like these to actually maybe get to know future partners and tackle this risk together. So from the OSCE side, that is all that I wanted to mention at this point. I believe you will get these presentations. There's the links to our tools, and please feel free to reach out in case of any questions. And now over to Julia Jin.
Thanks so much, Julia. As mentioned, I am the co-chair of the UN Interagency Task Force for Combating Human Trafficking and Forced Labor in Supply Chains. And I'm procurement officer at the International Labor Organization, the ILO, which is a specialized agency of the United Nations. And I also wish everyone a happy World Sustainable Procurement Day. What I'd like to share with you a bit about today is our task force, and also zooming out to overall what the UN is doing in the area of sustainable procurement, and also sharing with you a bit of the particular topics under social sustainability that the ILO is focusing on. So to start with our task force composition, as Julia mentioned, our task force was co-founded between the OSCE and the ILO, and it was established in 2019 by our high-level Committee on Management's Procurement Network, or HLCMPN, which is our procurement network of all the chiefs of procurement of all the UN organizations worldwide. And this group was established under our overall Sustainable Procurement Working Group. Our task force includes experts in procurement, human trafficking, forced labor, and supply chains from 16 organizations. And it is really an effort to combine areas of technical expertise to ensure that policies meet with operational realities. And you can see here quite a few of our diverse members that are represented on this interagency task force. Next slide, please. So how did our task force come about? It was a response to a call to action from the UN Security Council Resolution 2388, which calls upon United Nations systems organizations to enhance transparency in their procurement and supply chains and step up their efforts to strengthen protections against trafficking in persons in all United Nations procurement. So it's on the basis of this call to action that our task force was founded and was able to come together with these operational and technical experts to really find a way for how the UN can join the global fight in combating human trafficking and forced labor in our supply chains. Next slide, please. So to share with you a bit of the story of our task force since 2019, this is when we were established. In 2020 is when we first started working on a baseline survey and policy mapping to really understand where UN agencies were in this area of combating human trafficking and forced labor in supply chains, to understand where we were beginning and to identify gaps and what was needed. On the basis of that assessment, we then engaged in fundraising and drafting of a policy framework to develop a joint approach for UN organizations to start working on this area together and also in a one UN methodology. From that fundraising, we were able to create the policy framework. And in 2022, we adopted this policy framework. And the policy framework was adopted by the High-Level Committee on Management, which is the body that sits above our procurement network. Then in 2023, we started implementation of this policy framework, which has led to the creation of an internal e-learning tool for UN staff to understand how they can impact and contribute to this issue. And also, as Julia from OSCE mentioned, to really show that this is an organization-wide approach, that this issue is not going to be solvable only by the procurement function. So we're in the midst of that activity now. Next slide, please. So now speaking more to overall on UN sustainable procurement, our procurement network, as mentioned, has defined sustainable procurement as practices that integrate requirements, specifications, and criteria that are compatible and in favor of the protection of the environment, of social progress, and in support of economic development, namely by seeking resource efficiency, improving the quality of products and services, and ultimately optimizing costs. So on the basis of this definition, excuse me, on the basis of this definition, we have now our three pillars of our sustainable procurement indicators. We have an environmental indicators, social, and economic. When a tender has elements of each of these pillars, they can be denoted as a sustainable procurement tender with this associated label. What I'm showing to the right of the slide is a snapshot of the UN Global Marketplace, which is the website for any suppliers who are interested in working with the UN. This is the place to see all of our business opportunities. And you can see here several tenders that have been marked with the sustainable procurement logo. And this means that each of them have environmental, social, and economic sustainability aspects integrated into that tender, either through the technical specifications, the contract conditions, the evaluation criteria, etc. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of ILO procurement's particular focus is on social and economic aspects of sustainability. We do also represent environmental, but in view of our mandate of decent work and social justice, Our technical expertise allows us to focus on aspects of social sustainability. So this includes the sub-indicators of that pillar on human rights and labor issues. We have our labor clauses that are included in all ILO contracts. We are also working in aspects of human rights due diligence and what will that mean for our supply chains. The second being on the inclusion of persons with disabilities. And the ILO is working to ensure that everything that is purchased and obtained is accessible both in the digital space, but also in the physical space, and to leave no one behind. In terms of gender equality and women's empowerment, we work in the area of gender responsive procurement and to ensure non-discrimination in our business opportunities. And then finally, we have social health and well-being, which relates to our work in occupational safety and health of all the work sets that are associated with the ILO. What I wanted to highlight, these are all the sub-indicators of economic sustainability of the UN Sustainable Procurement Indicators. I wanted to highlight here the sub-indicator on local communities and SMEs. SMEs being an employer, they're one of the constituents of the ILO. It's important for us to consider the inclusion of SMEs in our procurement processes and ensure there are no additional barriers that exclude this important employer in the marketplace. Next slide, please. With that, we really thank you for your attention and for being here. And I echo what Julia from OSCE said, that please, if you have any additional questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Julia and Julia. That was a really interesting presentation. So it's great to hear sort of that global scale. And now we're going to go down to the local scale. Please drop, I think we've got a way of dropping questions into the chat. So please drop questions into the Zoom chat if you're online. Now I'm going to pass on to Gareth Rhys-Williams, Government Chief Officer, Commercial Officer for the UK Government. Gareth, I'll control the slides for you.
Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. Guy, thanks so much for organising this session, and thank you to my fellow participants for doing this. It's a fantastic event that you've set up here. I'm Gareth Rhys-Williams. I'm the Government Chief Commercial Officer. I joined the civil service about 8 years ago, having run a variety of companies and actually sold a little bit into government. So I've seen, if you like, both sides of the fence here. If we can have the next slide, please, Guy. Thanks. So what we've done on sustainable procurement within the UK government sort of fits within a wider range of things that I've popped up here on this slide. And to give some context, we spend as a public sector about £300 billion a year, just short of $400 billion, which is a lot. And we need to make sure that's done well and efficiently, but we also want to make sure that that spend is driving some overarching government strategies, of which, of course, net zero is a key one. And it is worth saying that our net zero by 2050 is a legal target now for the UK, something that we implemented in 2019. Another bit of context that's important here, as you know, UK left the European Union a number of years ago, and we've now introduced a new Procurement Act that is based on the same open, fair, transparent principles that we'd all recognise, but has allowed us to change slightly the focus of how we buy, from most economically advantageous tender to most economically advantageous. Most advantageous. Sorry, there's a typo there. Spot the difference there. Most advantageous tender, and that allows us to build in social value criteria, which I think Darren's going to come on and talk about in a minute. He's doing a fantastic job on that, but also particularly as regards sustainability. So can we pop on to the next slide, please, Guy? Great, thank you. So I just wanted to explain this in terms of a graphic, really. If you look at the box on the right, we have contracts with our suppliers, of course, and each of those contracts will have within it contract-specific measures, such that colleagues just talked about. What are we trying to achieve in terms of the sustainability of that contract, social value criteria within that contract? And that's something that's been particularly well received by our industry partners. It'll have comments on specification, low carbon materials, and so on and so forth. And of course, it'll have specific contract terms specific to that contract. What we've done, which I think is really interesting, and I would sort of recommend and promote to colleagues worldwide, is to add on top of that a company-wide requirement for a carbon reduction plan. So in order to even qualify to bid, a company needs to have a carbon reduction plan published, signed by a director on its website, open for public inspection, open for potential congratulations or potential criticism from lobby groups or from citizens. In order to make sure that we're not disproportionate in the work that we're asking suppliers to do, we've limited that to large contracts over £5 million. So that means that most SMEs who might find this onerous are unlikely to compete for contracts that size. But nonetheless, medium and large companies do get caught by that, but they have the ability to react to that. So this is one of really only a fairly few overarching exclusion criteria we have in the UK. This one on carbon reduction. We have another one on prompt payment. If companies aren't paying their supply chain properly for large contracts, we won't deal with them. And the third one is in the area of modern slavery, which I'm sure everyone on this call has already done. So it's a very limited number of overarching hurdles, if you like, or exclusions, and it's extremely effective. And the reason it's effective is that it applies to bids, not just to the winner of a contract contest. And it applies to their entire company. So we've been collecting for a while Scope 1, Scope 2, and part of Scope 3 emissions. These are declared by companies. So this is information we already have. The company either does or doesn't have a carbon reduction plan on the website. So this is easy to check. There's no very limited additional burden either for us or for the companies involved. And because it applies to their entire company, because to split public contracts away from private sector contracts would A, be onerous, and B, not achieve what we want, it also encompasses the work that company may or may not be doing for other private sector companies in the UK, or indeed other governments wherever. So it's extremely effective, and as I say, it applies to bids, not just to wins. Whereas, of course, contract by contract specific things apply to the winner of a contract. They're built into that contract documentation. Just to give you an idea of how far this has gone, we introduced this in September 21. We've already let over 300 billion pounds. So that's a year's worth of our spend, but it's only on these large contracts, as I said. And I think we've got more than 3,000 suppliers now who've got carbon reduction plans published, signed on to being worked on. So we're really generating a massive amount of effort in this direction for a relatively small burden. And I think it's fair to say this has been welcomed by the industry that supports us, because it has set a level playing field. Lots of our suppliers were doing this work anyway because they had enlightened leadership, but this has set a level that frankly industry have welcomed. So having run multinational companies myself before I joined the UK civil service, I know that if a number of countries pick up this idea, this is a bit of a plug, I'm afraid, a bit of an advertisement. If other countries adopt something like this, which is so simple, and it is elegant in its simplicity, then a lot of multinationals will say, well, I'm doing this in the UK, I'm doing this in this country, and that country, and this other country, this other country. You know what? We may as well do this worldwide. And then I think we've made it, we really have used public procurement to influence a global initiative, which I suspect is something we'd all support. Anyway, that's all from me. Very happy to take questions later on, Guy.
Great, thanks so much, Gareth. Normally, we restrict our presenters from not selling things online, but on this particular occasion, I think we'll allow that one to pass, Gareth, as you're selling so well at a global level. I love it. Thanks very much. Well, there's lots of questions coming in on Air Meet, so please keep them coming in, and I'll try and pick them up in our discussion in just a moment. But if I can now pass on to Darren, who's going to talk about how policy flows down into local communities, which ultimately what this is, public sector services is all about. Darren.
Morning, everybody, and happy World Sustainable Procurement Day. And breaking news, Gareth breaks the rules. Knock me over with a feather. If we can move on to the next slide. So my name's Darren. I'm very much enjoying the third phase of my career. I work global private sector in automotive. And then moved into local government, and now I'm collaborating with 4 organisations. So great to be with you and share some information. Next slide, please, Guy. So this slide really seeks to show the policy and practice landscape of social value in the UK. We were very lucky in 2012 to get something called the Public Services Social Value Act that was launched, and that, even though it only has a duty to consider putting social value into contracts, it did give us a lot of levers with organisations and colleagues that we work with to build social value into our projects. But one of the challenges we had was really trying to explain very simply and also to quantify what we meant by social value. So at the time I was leading the National Social Value Task Force, which we set up, and working together with Social Value Portal, we initiated something called the National TOMS, Themes, Outcomes and Measures. Other brands are available. And that really was a game changer to enable us to build social value into our projects, quantify it, hold suppliers to account, and then make sure it happened. And then shortly after, central government launched a procurement policy note, making social value mandatory in their projects with a minimum of 10% weighting. And most helpfully, in June 21, Cabinet Office introduced something called the National Procurement Policy Statement. You can look it up, but you'll see set out in there are several objectives of the government that all public procurers should have regard to. And that's really been strengthened with the Procurement Act of 2023, which will hopefully be live and usable by October this year, which Gareth touched on briefly. But that really gives us a much stronger lever because it legislates in that act that all public procurers must have regard for the National Procurement Policy Statement and the objectives set out. So really now we, social value is becoming mainstream. Next, please, Guy. So you'll be pleased to know I'm not going to read all of this out, so it is very much for bedtime reading. But in my role, I'm often asked, what does sustainable procurement mean? What is ESG? What is CSR? What is social value? So this is my attempt to try and clarify it, and you can read it at your leisure. But I think importantly for me, social value is the value that an organisation contributes to society beyond a reported profit. And it's measured, and the measurement is really important, by social, economic and environmental actions. And we very much, particularly in local government, use the National TOMS in the UK, Themes, Outcomes and Measures to do that. Some people have criticised us for monetising social value, but it does give us objectivity, fairness, transparency and the ability to use social value criteria in our decision making. And we mustn't forget something that Guy always talks about is the fact behind every pound or every dollar is a real life. And you can see there that social value it's a much broader understanding of value, and it really puts people at the centre of decision making, and really, you have an ability to impact on well-being changes for people, which is, doing good, and doing good is good business. Next slide, please, Guy. And I was reflecting this morning on the 21st of March. In the UK, it's virtually 4 years to the day that we entered into our first pandemic lockdown. It seems like an eternity ago. Nevertheless, it was a very tricky time, but out of something bad always comes something good. And I realised, working with central government, local government, and the wider public sector during the pandemic, where we were thrown together and had to collaborate whether we wanted to or not, that particularly we were basically all working with the same customer. So I initiated a project in County Durham called the County Durham Pound, that you can see there, which is very much a collaboration of the council, of police, of fire, of health, of college, of university, and of housing. And we all committed via a statement of intent to try to do good things in the community, to help our community recover from the pandemic, but also to help us achieve our own business objectives. And you see there, it was about jobs, it was about health and well-being, equality, diversity, impact on the environment, training and upskilling, and doing good things for our communities. And you can read that there at your leisure, but it just really, I guess, summarises for me that we're all on a journey. We all do our best to deliver good social value outcomes. But if you can work with other people who are working within your market and collaborate, you can get a place-based approach, and ultimately the outcomes will be really good for your communities. So I'll stop there, Guy.
Great, thanks so much. Yeah, thanks so much, Darren. That's really, really good. And now to the live stage, Alexandra. Alexandra, if I could ask you to keep to your allotted 5 minutes, that would be fantastic. It'll give us just a few minutes for a discussion. Alexandra, I will control the slides for you. Over to you.
Okay. Can you hear me well, everyone, online? Yeah?
Yeah, we can. As long as you bring the microphone close to your mouth, we'll be fine.
Brilliant. Okay. It felt really lonely here alone on stage. I'm quite happy to come back in this room and to actually talk about the EU now. So I'm Alexandria Gill. I work for the European Association for Innovation in Local Development. But I'm not here to talk about me or about the organization. I'm here to talk about a European Commission initiative, which is called We Buy Social EU, which the European Commission has entrusted us to implement. Next slide, please, Guy. And I'll start with a question, which actually, Guy, you sort of tackled more broadly in your introduction. But did you know that public procurement accounts for about 14% of the EU's GDP? It's huge. And the second question is then, could this be done more responsibly, more socially? Next slide. This is basically exactly what the European Commission wants to tackle. It wants to support public authorities and social economy entities, including social enterprises, to get better at that by promoting what is called, within the EU framework, socially responsible public procurement, or SRPP. Next slide. And it's doing this through an initiative that we call We Buy Social EU, or its longer version, training and awareness raising activities in SRPP. As I said, the target audiences of this contract, of this initiative, are public authorities at all levels and social economy entities, including social enterprises. And what does this initiative do? It consists in training events in 12 of our member states across along 2024, and a communication campaign across all of the EU until 2025. Next slide, please. I'll start with the communication campaign. This is a communication campaign in all of the member states, as I said, so it concerns all of you guys here in the room and maybe some of you online. The idea is to increase public buyers' awareness of the benefits of socially responsible public procurement, but also to inform social economy entities about the possibilities offered by SRPP to access markets. So my first call to action to all of you is to say, please keep an eye out for the We Buy Social EU hashtag. There are some organizations here in the room that are actually supporting this initiative already. The communication campaign is going to kick off in April. It's been tailored, and when I say tailored, we've done a research in all of the member states so that the messaging is tailored to the level of maturity of the ecosystem in each of the countries. So please like, share, repost, comment, spread within your organizations and beyond. And this is my second call for action. So as I said, we'll be organizing training events in 12 member states, the ones that you can see on the screen here. Some of you are located in those countries, so please have a look at those dates. Next slide, actually, guys, sorry, because we have a different screen here. Next slide, Guy, yeah. So okay. You can have a look here at the upcoming dates, or month at least, for these events. Again, these are free, tailored events delivered by experts, hosted by the European Commission in those countries, open to public authorities and to social economy enterprises. The next slide, please. The aims of the training events are to improve public authorities' knowledge of socially responsible public procurement, but it's also to increase the capacity of social economy entities to respond to public tenders. Next slide. And I'll just give you a little sort of insights into the type of learning outcomes that these training events are going to look at. So for civil servants or public authorities, it could be about learning how to design tendering procedures that are accessible to the social economy and that include social aspects. It would be about learning how to include different types of social considerations across the procurement process. And it can be also about improving the knowledge of social economy, how and in which markets they operate, who they are, what they can do with public authorities. Next slide. On the other hand, for social economy entities, those training events could look at learning how to compete for public tenders that include social considerations, but also how to form consortia to go for it, how to form consortia with so-called conventional businesses, or how to participate as subcontractors for these tenders. So that's all for me. Next slide, please. Follow the hashtag WeBuySocialEU. This is a brilliant, very ambitious initiative of the European Commission, and we really count on you. Thank you, Guy. Over to you.
Great. Thanks very much indeed. We'll stop sharing the screen now and just bring everyone. Yeah, thank you for the claps. Yeah, we can't hear those online, but that's great. Thank you, Alexandra. Thank everyone online. So we've got just about 9 minutes, just a quick conversation, and I want to kind of go through a series of things, kind of the words that have jumped out at from this conversation is that strings attached, remedies was brought up, and teeth. Collaboration and community. Those are the sort of things I want to tackle. If I can start off with kind of the broader responsibility of the public sector to drive an opportunity, I should say, to drive change within our private sector, within our community, and how do we balance the responsibility or the opportunity we have to spend money responsibly with layers and layers of compliance. And there's a question in that's come in through AirMeet where one of the SMEs has said, we don't want too much compliance, otherwise it makes it really difficult for us. So if I can just bring in Julia Schkellerhaus first, and then I'll go to Julia Jin, and then I'll bring Gareth into that conversation. So Julie, do you want to talk about the strings and the broader responsibility that we have?
Could you please read the question?
Yes. So the question is, what responsibility does the public sector buyers have to deliver? What opportunity does public sector buyer have to deliver sustainable procurement? And how do we make sure that the strings attached, the compliance issues aren't so great that we restrict businesses to get involved?
I mean, as in many sectors, the public, like the government, or also, I mean, other public buyer is one of the biggest customers, like, I don't know, construction or defense. So we do have a certain leverage as a public institution to use that. And also, I mean, in the UN context, there's roughly 30 billion a year in spend that can be leveraged. So this can be used and influenced, as I was also mentioning in my presentation, that we have the chance to educate the market, to influence buyers, to align our standards. It's not something that that's new. It will be also coming up. Like, I mean, we know that environmental considerations are already more mainstream, and we are really trying to make the social elements as mainstream as well. So we do, by educating our buyers and the market, we do have this chance by providing advocacy, capacity building, policy guidance to governments as well. Like, for example, in the OSCE, we do advise governments. We also do mention what we have been doing internally and advise them to sort of copy that model or align maybe their processes a bit more with this. So you can do a lot on capacity building with governments and other sort of partners, also within our international organization network, but then also you can directly influence the market by leveraging the spend and offering opportunities to the market under the condition of these considerations.
Yeah, that's great. And Julia Jin, this influence the market, strings applied, there is, the opportunity around public sector spend to change things around human trafficking, for instance. I mean, how do you see that playing out, and how can you, as a sort of global organization, influence sort of more governments and then down to communities?
Thanks, Guy. And I also like this notion of how do you balance to not be overly stringent in the requirements for bidding companies. So to respond, I think there must be a focus on what are the human rights risks and what do they look like in your market? And this can be really based on a sectoral approach, because we know human rights risks, whether it's accessibility, persons with disabilities, combating human trafficking, forced labor, occupational safety and health is one of the issues raised in the questions that we received. These look different in the different sectors. And to have public buyers be aware of the different ways in which we can tackle these. How to be flexible and not to be overly stringent is first to understand your market and understand the human rights risks that you're trying to tackle. And in one way that we try to ensure that we don't exclude MSMEs is if we do ask, for example, for like what are your environmental sustainability policies in a tender? Now that could come to us in like an 100-page glossy brochure, but we also invite to say, please describe to us what are your activities and what are your programs that you have ongoing and what do you have planned in your company. So this could be a recycling program in gender responsive. This could be, trying to advertise your business opportunities widely to really allow bidders to share what their activities are that are appropriate for their particular local context, because everyone has different legislative frameworks as well.
Yeah.
But I think it's also about educating the buyers on what they can ask to have really meaningful results.
Okay, that's great. Good. And I just want to bring Gareth in now, Gareth, and you spoke very eloquently about the changes that UK government is driving through carbon. And, there's a limit, that's the £5 million sort of ceiling. How has the UK government balanced this sort of this challenge of really wanting to drive sustainability through the supply chain, but not overburdening businesses, especially SMEs, which make 96% of, our business community here in the UK?
Guy, it's a great question. And there's, in any policy issue, there's a trade-off of effect and burden, isn't there? And trying to find a happy ground in the middle is very tricky. So of course we're not allowed to discriminate against companies on the basis of company size. That would be wrong. And indeed, much of what we've done in the Procurement Act that I touched on is designed to enable SME spend, small, medium enterprise spend with government. We've made ourselves simpler. We're going to continue to make ourselves simpler to deal with. Single databases so that SMEs don't have to have a burden to deal with us, and that's working really well. Our spend with SMEs goes up year and year and year. So when we think about how to apply it to this, we thought, well, how can we do this in a way that is fair, non-discriminatory, but still keeps them away from extra work? And that's why we came up with this idea of a contract size criteria for for this exclusion measure, and I think it's worked really well. Arguably, the hurdle could have been a bit lower, but then we would have, perhaps caused some trouble. But we've had no issues with suppliers complaining, because a supplier that is bidding for a £5 million contract, that's a reasonable sized company, and the clever thing about it is that, as I think I said, it catches the whole company. So if most of the contracts they deal with government are £500 or £10 million, but they have one £5 million contract, then they have to do this, and we catch them like that. So I think it's worked well.
Okay, that's great. Okay, we've just got a minute left, so 30 seconds for Darren and 30 seconds for Alexandra, so forgive me time. Darren, the power of collaboration, really important. This is delivering real value, or has delivered real value for Durham. Just talk a little bit more about how you see collaboration working in and why it's important to communities.
Yeah, I think so, particularly in the government sector and local government specifically. I think the really important thing is to think about who is the customer of your business and what do they need. And if you can find like-minded people in organisations who do similar things to you and help each other achieve your own business objectives, but deliver good outcomes for people, then for me that's what social value's all about. And sometimes as procurement people we squabble about things, but I've never had a fight about delivering good outcomes for people and social value opportunities in your place. So I think that's pretty much all for me, Guy.
That's great. And finally, Phil, Alexandra, I'll bring you back into the conversation just for 30 seconds. Your ask of everyone on the call, what's the opportunity as you see it, Alexandra?
Not yet. Yes. No, I mean, you were talking about the power of collaboration. Precisely, the We Buy Social EU is all about promoting, fostering, enabling collaborations between public authorities at all levels and social enterprises and more broadly social economy organizations. So the call to action again was to promote this across your socials, but also join those training where not only are we going to build capacity with legal experts and social economy experts and public procurement experts, but we're also going to provide a networking opportunity. So to connect those together, to get to know each other better.
Fantastic. Okay, that's great. Well, we've run out of time now. So if I can thank Euclid first and also SPP for collaborating this. And this technology has worked pretty well, actually. I thought it was going to crash, but you've done the most amazing job in getting us all engaged. Of course, I also want to thank our fantastic panel of Julia, Gareth, Darren, and also Alexandra. And I hope you felt slightly more included, Alexandra, than being on your own. But great to have you all here. And please enjoy the rest of the day. And with that, we will say thank you very much for attending and goodbye.